The city precinct was always a loud, chaotic place. Phones rang non-stop, officers stomped in and out, and the buzz of conversation filled the air. Officer Jack, a tall, broad-shouldered man with a sharp tongue, was the loudest of them all. Jack was known for being brash and quick to judge. His laugh could be heard across the room as he cracked jokes with his buddies, often at the expense of others. Before we dive into this intense and emotional story, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a powerful story like this one. This story will challenge your emotions, keep you on the edge of your seat, and leave you with a lesson you'll never forget. Don't just watch. Be part of our community by liking, commenting, and sharing your thoughts. Now get ready for a journey you won't want to miss. On this particular day, the precinct was abuzz with excitement and tension. A new police chief was arriving, but no one knew much about him. Some said he was strict and no nonsense. Others whispered that he'd been brought in to clean up the precinct's growing reputation for misconduct. Jack wasn't worried. He figured it would be business as usual. After all, nobody tells me how to do my job, he thought. In the middle of the noise and commotion, a quiet figure stepped into the precinct. Mr. Daniels, a black man in his 40s dressed in a crisp button-down shirt and slacks, walked in with an air of calm confidence. He had a small briefcase in one hand and an envelope in the other. Jack spotted him immediately and sized him up. "Who's this guy?" he muttered under his breath. Daniels made his way to the front desk and spoke politely to the officer behind it. "Good afternoon," Mr. Daniels said with a warm smile. "I'm looking for the chief's office. Could you point me in the right direction?" The officer at the desk looked puzzled and didn't respond immediately. That's when Jack stepped in. "Hey," Jack called out, his voice sharp and commanding. "What do you think you're doing here?" Mr. Daniels turned calmly toward Jack. "I'm here to see the chief," he replied evenly. Jack frowned, his eyes narrowing. "The chief doesn't have time for people like you just strolling in off the street. What do you want? Filing a complaint or something?" His tone was dripping with sarcasm. "No, I'm not here to file a complaint," Mr. Daniels said, still calm. "I just need to be directed to the chief's office." Jack stepped closer, towering over Mr. Daniels. The room began to quiet as the officers nearby sensed the tension. "Listen," Jack said, his voice low and threatening. "You don't just walk in here and demand to see the chief. This isn't a charity. If you don't have a good reason to be here, I suggest you turn around and walk out before you regret it." Mr. Daniels didn't flinch. He held Jack's gaze, his calm demeanor unwavering. "I don't believe I've given you any reason to treat me this way," he said firmly. Jack's face flushed red with anger. He hated being challenged, especially in front of the other officers. Without thinking, he spat on Mr. Daniels, his anger boiling over. The spit landed on Mr. Daniels' shirt, leaving a dark stain. A collective gasp spread across the room. Mr. Daniels didn't say a word. He simply pulled out a handkerchief from his pocket, wiped his shirt, and looked Jack directly in the eyes. His voice was quiet but firm as he said, "You'll regret this." As Mr. Daniels walked away, the precinct was silent. Officers exchanged uneasy glances, unsure of what had just happened or who this man was. This story is getting intense, isn't it? If you're hooked and want more stories packed with drama, suspense, and powerful life lessons, make sure to subscribe to our channel and hit the notification bell so you never miss a moment. And if you're feeling the emotions right now, give this video a like to show your support. What do you think is going to happen next? Let us know in the comments below. Your thoughts matter to us. Now let's get back to the story and see how it all unfolds. Jack smirked, turning back to his buddies. "What a clown," he said with a laugh, trying to shake off the tension. But deep down, even he felt a twinge of unease. Whispers began to spread around the room as officers who had seen the interaction murmured to each other. "Who was that guy?" someone asked. He didn't look like an ordinary visitor. Unknown to Jack, his world was about to be turned upside down. The man he had humiliated was no ordinary visitor. He was the new chief of police, and he was about to teach Jack a lesson he would never forget. Later that afternoon, the precinct was filled with nervous energy. Every officer had been called into the main briefing room to meet the new police chief. Officers straightened their uniforms, whispered rumors, and speculated about what kind of leader the new chief would be. Jack, however, lounged at the back of the room with his feet casually kicked. Up on a chair. He wasn't worried. Another stiff in a suit, probably, he thought, smirking. The captain entered the room first, his face unusually tense. "Attention!" he barked, and the officers scrambled to stand up straight. "Ladies and gentlemen, I am honored to introduce your new chief of police, Chief Daniels." All eyes turned to the door as Chief Daniels entered the room, walking with quiet confidence. Gas rippled through the crowd. Jack's heart skipped a beat, and his stomach churned. There, standing at the front of the room in full uniform, was the very same black man Jack had spat on earlier that day. Chief Daniels scanned the room, his face calm but serious. He seemed to pause for just a moment when his eyes landed on Jack, who froze in his seat. The silence in the room was deafening. Some officers exchanged uneasy glances, realizing what had happened earlier. Chief Daniels began to speak, his voice steady and authoritative. "Good afternoon, everyone. I am Chief Daniels, and I am honored to serve as your new leader." His words were measured, each one carrying weight. "Let me tell you something about myself. I believe in justice, fairness, and respect. I believe that wearing this badge is not just a job, it's a responsibility to protect and serve all people, regardless of who they are." His tone grew firmer, his gaze sharp as he scanned the room. "Some of you have forgotten that responsibility. Some of you think this badge gives you the right to look down on others, to treat people with disrespect." The tension in the room was palpable. Everyone knew he was talking about Jack, but no one dared to speak. Chief Daniels took a deep breath and continued, his voice calm but piercing. "Earlier today, I encountered something that reminded me why I took this job. A moment that showed me exactly why this precinct needs change." The room went dead silent as Daniels locked eyes with Jack. "Officer Jack," he said, his voice firm but calm, "I'd like to see you in my office after this meeting." Jack's face turned pale. His usual bravado was gone, replaced by a mix of fear and humiliation. He glanced around the room, but no one dared meet his eyes. Whispers broke out among the officers as Chief Daniels continued his speech, laying out his vision for a precinct that operated with fairness and accountability. As the meeting ended, the officers were buzzing with speculation. "Did you see his face? Jack looked like he was going to faint," one officer whispered to another. "Do you think he's going to get fired?" Even Jack's closest friends didn't come to his defense. Deep down, they all knew Jack had gone too far this time. Jack, meanwhile, sat frozen in his chair, dreading what awaited him in the chief's office. As Jack walked toward Chief Daniels' office, the weight of the moment settled on him. The laughter and arrogance that usually followed him were gone. His mind raced. Would he lose his job? Would he face public humiliation? When he reached the door, he hesitated, his hand hovering over the handle. He took a deep breath, pushed the door open, and stepped inside, knowing that whatever happened next would change his life forever. Jack stepped into Chief Daniels' office, his heart pounding like a drum. The room was eerily quiet, with only the faint ticking of a clock on the wall. Chief Daniels sat behind his desk, calm but commanding. His hands were folded, and his sharp eyes bore into Jack's soul. "Close the door," Daniel said, his voice steady. Jack hesitated for a moment, then obeyed. He felt trapped, like a mouse caught in a cage. The silence in the room stretched on for what felt like an eternity before Daniels finally spoke again. "Do you know why you're here?" Chief Daniels asked, leaning back in his chair. Jack fumbled for words. "Look, Chief, Stop." Daniel's voice cut through Jack's excuses like a knife. "This isn't the time for excuses. I want to hear the truth. What were you thinking when you spat on me earlier today?" Jack's face flushed red. He looked down at the floor, unable to meet the chief's gaze. I didn't know who you were," he mumbled. Daniels raised an eyebrow. "So if I wasn't the chief, your behavior would have been acceptable? Is that what you're saying?" His tone was calm, but the weight of his words pressed down on Jack like a heavy stone. Chief Daniels stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the bustling city below. "Let me tell you something, Officer Jack," he began. "I've faced people like you my entire life. People who see my skin before they see my character. People who think they can humiliate me just because they're wearing a uniform." He turned back to face Jack, his voice filled with quiet intensity. I grew up in a neighborhood where we didn't trust the police. I saw my friends harassed, my family disrespected. But I didn't let that define me. I worked harder than anyone else, not because I wanted to prove people like you wrong, but because I believed in something bigger. I believed that the badge could mean justice, not power. Jack shifted uncomfortably in his seat. For the first time, he felt a pang of guilt. He'd always thought of himself as a good officer, but Daniel's words made him question everything. Daniels walked back to his desk and leaned forward, staring directly at Jack. What you did today wasn't just disrespectful, it was disgraceful. It wasn't just about me, it was about the example you're setting for this precinct and this community. Do you think people trust us when they see officers like you acting this way? Jack shook his head, his voice barely above a whisper. No, sir. Daniels nodded. That's right. And let me tell you something else. I didn't come here to let this kind of behavior slide. I came here to clean it up. Jack felt a chill run down his spine. He opened his mouth to apologize, but Daniels held up a hand. I don't want your apology, Jack. I want to see if you're capable of change. Actions speak louder than words, and right now your actions are screaming the wrong message. Chief Daniels sat back in his chair, his expression unreadable. I'm going to give you a choice, he said. You can face public disciplinary action, which will be documented and could potentially end your career. Or you can take on a special assignment that will challenge you to rethink everything you believe about this job. Jack looked up, confused. What kind of assignment? Daniel smiled, but it wasn't a friendly smile. You're going to spend the next 3 months doing community service in the neighborhood I grew up in. You'll work with the people who have every reason to distrust you. You'll listen to their stories. You'll see what it feels like to be on the other side of the badge. And maybe, just maybe, you'll learn something. Jack's first instinct was to argue, but he caught himself. He could see that Daniels wasn't bluffing. With a heavy sigh, he nodded. I'll do the assignment. Daniels leaned forward, his eyes piercing. Good. But let me be clear. If I hear so much as one complaint about you during this assignment, you're done. Do you understand? Yes, sir, Jack said quietly. As Jack left the office, he felt a mix of anger, shame, and fear. His usual confidence was gone, replaced by a heavy sense of dread. He knew the next 3 months would be the hardest of his life, but deep down, a small part of him wondered if this might be the chance he needed to become a better person. Back in his office, Chief Daniels sat back in his chair, feeling a bittersweet satisfaction. He knew he had to be tough on Jack, not just for his sake, but for the sake of the entire precinct. This was more than just punishment. It was the beginning of a transformation, one that could ripple out and change the culture of the department for good. Jack's assignment began in a neighborhood he had never set foot in before. It was the kind of place he had always associated with trouble. A struggling community with broken down houses, graffiti on the walls, and streets buzzing with activity. But as he walked into the local community center, wearing plain clothes instead of his uniform, he quickly realized this wasn't just about patrolling, it was about rebuilding trust. On his first day, Jack was tasked with helping at an after-school program for kids. Most of the children ignored him, but one boy, Malik, glared at him with open hostility. You're just here to spy on us, Malik said, crossing his arms. Jack didn't know how to respond, so he just stayed quiet and focused on helping set up the room. But Malik's words stuck with him. As the days turned into weeks, Jack began to see a different side of the neighborhood. He met parents working multiple jobs to provide for their families. He listened to elderly residents talk about how they used to trust the police until officers started treating them like criminals instead of neighbors. Jack's presence wasn't always welcome. One afternoon, a group of teens confronted him while he was helping clean up a park. "Why are you even here?" one of them sneered. "You think you can fix things with a broom and a trash bag?" Jack wanted to snap back, but he remembered Chief Daniels' words. This isn't about you, it's about them. Instead, he lowered the broom and said, I'm here because I messed up. And I'm trying to learn how to do better. The teens didn't respond, but they didn't push him any further either. For Jack, it felt like a small victory. One evening, Jack was walking back to his car when he saw Malik and a few other kids standing on the corner. Malik was arguing with a man twice his size who looked angry and threatening. Jack's instincts kicked in, and he rushed over. "Is everything okay here?" Jack asked, trying to keep his voice calm. Malik looked up, startled. "I don't need your help," he snapped, but Jack could see the fear in his eyes. The man turned to Jack, sizing him up. "Stay out of this," he growled. Jack didn't back down. "He's just a kid. Whatever the problem is, it's not worth this." The man eventually walked away, muttering under his breath, and Malik stared at Jack, confused. "Why'd you do that?" he asked. Jack shrugged. "Because it was the right thing to do." For the first time, Malik didn't look at Jack with anger. Instead, there was a flicker of something else. Maybe respect. At the end of the 3 months, Jack returned to the precinct, unsure of what to expect. Chief Daniels called him into his office and gestured for him to sit. "So," Daniels said, leaning back in his chair, "what did you learn?" Jack took a deep breath. "I learned that I didn't know as much as I thought I did," he admitted. "I thought being a cop was just about enforcing the law, but it's about more than that. It's about earning people's trust and showing them you care." Daniels nodded, his expression unreadable. "And do you think you've earned their trust?" Jack hesitated. "Not all of it, but I think I've started to." Daniels studied him for a moment, then smiled faintly. "Good. That's more than I expected." Chief Daniels decided to let Jack stay on the force, but with conditions. Jack would take on a mentorship role, working with young officers to teach them about building relationships with the community. He would also continue his work in the neighborhood, not as punishment, but as part of his duty to serve. For the first time in years, Jack felt a sense of purpose beyond himself. He didn't forget the shame of his actions, but he used it as fuel to become better. Slowly, he began to rebuild his reputation, not just within the precinct, but in the community as well. One day, as Jack was walking through the neighborhood, he saw Malik playing basketball with his friends. Malik waved at him, a small but meaningful gesture. Jack smiled and waved back. It wasn't much, but it was a start. Back at the precinct, Chief Daniels watched Jack from his office window. He knew there was still a long way to go, but seeing the change in Jack gave him hope. One officer couldn't change the world, but maybe, just maybe, he could help change the culture of the precinct, one step at a time. Wow, what an emotional journey. If this story moved you, taught you something, or left you wanting more, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel for more powerful stories like this. Hit the notification bell so you never miss a new upload. And we want to hear from you. What would you have done in Jack's shoes? Or Chief Daniels? Drop your thoughts in the comments below and let's start a conversation. Share this video with someone who loves meaningful stories, and we'll see you in the next one.